Hi. This video I just want to cover a couple of issues that leave myself, and I know many people, very uncomfortable. And you know, I hope it won't be taken by those who presently support Trump as a judgment against them personally, because you know, I do understand the dynamics of what goes on in this world and how the media and even the alternative media can infect people and, you know, put blinkers on people so that they don't take everything into account. And you know, I really don't feel that people should be feeling guilty for finding themselves as having fallen victim to well, supporting or even covertly endorsing crime and criminals. And even though I do feel that's what people are duped into, and in fact that's what our whole money system does support, we know it's an unfair, imbalanced system that has created an unfair and imbalanced economy and unfair and imbalanced societies. And within that arena, every type of crime is committed, and people who have enough money, it seems, have also the power to buy away guilt. You know, they can buy away, they can walk through life with a clean criminal record because they have a large bank account and be beyond suspicion because they have a very large bank account. Now, I've read the two sworn affidavits, in fact I think there might be three, against Trump. Now, these are affidavits that were made, sworn under oath, because in order to bring a case to the court, which this was about to be heard on trial, and then before the trial, the plaintiffs drop the case, they withdraw their statements. And what that means is that allegations have been issued, they've been made public, they've been sworn on oath and submitted to a court, and then a cloud of suspicion surrounds the accused, and then suddenly the allegations are dropped. So the accused is then left to live under the cloud of suspicion, because there's never been a trial to prove that he's innocent. In that circumstance where a person is denied, and a person who's been accused is denied the chance to stand trial over serious allegations of child abuse, child sexual abuse, in that case, those plaintiffs need to be prosecuted for perjury, because it is an unreasonable level of suspicion for people to live under, and for people to have to tolerate against somebody who has become president of their nation. It is an unreasonable level of suspicion to have hanging over the head of somebody who has his finger on the nuclear button. Now, had there been no other even hint of Trump having any connections to sexual offences and child abuse and child abusers, then yeah, you know, people would have been, what you want about? The guy's as clean as a dice. But when we look at Trump's history, we realise that, no, he isn't as clean, is he? Because we have his taped confession here. His recorded confession, his recorded admission. Now, people have dismissed this as locker room talk. Okay, and you know, he talks about grabbing women in the pussy. Now, this is a very, very disturbing piece of evidence that America needs to look at. And like I say, don't give yourself a hard time if you suddenly realise that you've been led down a very wrong path. Okay, do not give yourself a hard time for that. Forgive yourself and move on. Okay, because it's not your fault that there's bad people in this world who do deceive innocent, good people who don't immediately understand the full dynamics of what's gone on, and who then just pick up on, you know, the propaganda that no, this was just locker room talk, you know. Okay, so let's have a look at this locker room talk. First of all, they're sat in a huge bus type thing, and this woman, who's a professional woman, and they're all here in a professional capacity at a TV studios, because he's going to take part in a US soap opera called Days of Our Lives. So this is a professional setting, and she's a professional woman. She's not a prostitute, they're not at a strip club, okay? And yet this is how they're talking about her as she approaches the bus, as she's walking towards the bus that's just pulled in, and just before they left the bus, okay? This is how they're talking. Oh, your girl's hot as shit in the purple. Multiple voices. Whoa, yeah, whoa. Yeah, the Donald has scored. Whoa, my man. Look at you. You are a pussy. You got to get the thumbs up. Maybe it's a different one. It better not be the publicist. No, it's her. Yeah, her with the gold. I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. Yeah, those legs. All I can see is those legs. It looks good. Come on, shorty. Oh, nice legs, huh? Get out of the way, honey. Oh, it's good legs. Go away. Go ahead. Now, as he says that, get out of the way, honey. A woman has passed the bus and has obviously obscured their view of this woman. It's always good if you don't fall out of the bus. Okay, so here you go. Now, before this conversation, he's talking about a woman who he says used to be great. She's still very beautiful, but obviously she used to be great, even though now she's just very beautiful. She's not great. I moved on her, actually. You know, she was down on Palm Beach. I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it. I did try and fuck her. She was married. That's huge news there. No, Nancy. No, this was, and I moved on her very heavily, in fact. I took her out furniture shopping. She wanted to get some furniture. I said, I'll show you where they have some nice furniture. I moved on her like a bitch. I couldn't get there, and she was married. Then all of a sudden I see her, you know. I couldn't get there, she was married. I moved on her like a bitch. I did try and fuck her. How do you move on somebody like a bitch? How do you do that? How do you try and fuck somebody? What does it entail? Does it entail grabbing them by the pussy? Trying to force yourself on them, kissing them? So obviously if he tried to fuck her, she obviously had to fend her off. He moved on her very heavily, in fact. Now we're talking about a married woman here. It's bad enough and an unmarried woman, but this is what another point that I wish to make is that when men like Trump commit sexual offences against women, it is not just that woman who is impacted, it is also the men in her life who are impacted. And on a married woman, suppose this woman had suffered unwanted attentions from men before. Suppose she was a victim of rape or had been sexually abused as a child, and then suddenly she's with a friend who she thinks is a friend of her and her husband, who's offered to take her out to get some furniture to go, because he's got great taste in furniture, and I'll show you where you can get some nice furniture from, that the man has got so little respect for humanity, for the law, for loyalty to a friend, okay? He dismisses all of that in order to try and fuck a married woman. And then she goes home, and then it's triggered some PTSD from a past sex offence she's suffered. And then she's not interested in sex for a while. Her husband doesn't understand what's wrong. She's probably not told her husband because she doesn't want there to be any trouble. And then, you know, her children are wondering why mummy's not very happy this week. What's going on with mummy? Oh, she's been drinking a lot. You know, these are the impacts that nobody, you know, the outside world don't see. And people can say, oh, yeah, so what, he grabbed you in the pussy, get over it. But people don't get over it, because it's a violation. It's a violation of friendship, it's a violation of the law, it's a violation of respect. And I find it really, really disturbing that people can just dismiss this, that people have dismissed this as locker room talk, that the idea is that when men get together, well, of course they talk about women like that, because really that's all you are. You know, all the show of friendliness that has been shown here is nothing. We would just want to get our hands on your body, you know. So the men I know, and I will say this is most of the men I know. I mean, maybe I'm just unusual. I know strange men, but I don't think they are. They're normal human beings. You know, they're blokes, and they're friends. They're good friends who've never ever made any moves on me sexually whatsoever. And they'll always be my friend. I'll always be their friend. And we relate to each other as human beings. If a man had moved into, you know, gone into their home, there were a group of men all sat together, and one of their friends talked about this, saying that he moved on a woman like a bitch, they'd tell him to fuck off. They'd be absolutely outraged. They'd be like, what? You tried to fuck her? And even she's married as well. What, you moved on her like a bitch? Fuck off out of my house. Who the fuck are you? How do I know you're not going to attack my wife? How do I know you're not going to attack my teenage daughter? Piss off. Because you see, I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist. And I feel it is an offence against men to have him representing them, okay, as a man, and he's representing men, and he's saying, yeah, this is what us guys do, innit, when we're all together. We talk about women like this. Well, not all men do. Birds of a feather flock together, they say. And perhaps the entertainment industry and politics is a bit too bloody full of it. Because most of the men I know would be absolutely outraged at a guy admitting not only to sexually assaulting a woman, like trying to force himself on a woman, but even a married woman who is a friend, such a friend, and obviously is a friend of her husband, that he will even then attack her, you know, try to fuck her, move on her very heavily. So, you know, and straight after that, there they are talking about, you know, a professional business engagement and treating it like, you know, it's a night out at a strip club. And, you know, then you have all this stuff about how you can ignore political correctness. We need to stop being politically correct. This is how we can talk. There's nothing political about being a lawful, considerate, respectful, compassionate human being. That's not being politically correct. That's being a human being. People who feel that being a human being is about being politically correct are the kind of people who have no connection to humanity, in which case, what are they doing as President of the White House? Now, when we look at this one, witness list case involving paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. You know, this is why the allegations are evidenced with lawful suspicion, because suspicion becomes lawful when it is evidence, when there's evidence to support the suspicion that a crime has probably been committed, in which case then charges can be brought against that person and the person can then stand trial, and then the public can know for sure whether the person is guilty or innocent. The accused will have a chance to defend themselves and put their side of the case across, and the prosecution will put their side of the case across, and either way, hopefully, in 9 times out of 10, we find out that a person is either guilty or innocent. Now, I'm not saying in such cases as sexual offences that because somebody is found innocent, that therefore the plaintiff should be immediately prosecuted for perjury. But what I am saying is that if the plaintiff withdraws their allegations, if it's related specifically to sexual offences, if the plaintiff withdraws their sworn affidavit before, just prior to the case going to trial, then that person, those people, need to be prosecuted for perjury, because they've left a cloud of suspicion that somebody is a sex offender, and the public has evidence to support that suspicion as a lawful probability because of his confessions, because of his previous crimes against women, because he is a good friend of known paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, because the two women that have made statements against him are known to have stayed on the Epstein Island, and one of the witnesses said she herself had been trafficked to the island and she was actually working for Epstein in procuring the young girl that alleged Mr. Trump raped and violently assaulted her. Okay, so the witnesses were in the places that they said they were. The man whose island they were staying on is now a known convicted paedophile. Mr. Trump and the Clintons are among his circle of friends and are known to have visited the island. We have Mr. Trump's own confessions that he is prepared to very heavily try and fuck a married woman who is a friend, along with her husband who is a friend. So that is lawful suspicion. And now, because those two plaintiffs have withdrawn their statements, we are just left with the suspicion, the lawful suspicion, and with all the evidence to support that lawful suspicion. That's not to say he is guilty, because we can't say that he's guilty. There needs to be a trial. But the suspicion is valid. It's a valid suspicion, as is against the Clintons. Now, the third point that I think we need to make is, like for example this, and this is about Clinton, okay, and I don't think there's been a case against him over it. I don't think he's been prosecuted over it. Okay, but you know, let's just go down to have a look at the comments here, because you know, I mean, no doubt that Bill Clinton is as shady as it gets, okay, and Hillary Clinton. So one Trump supporter here says Trump has a lot of ammunition to choose from. She should never get near the White House. That's Hillary Clinton. Clinton should be in jail. Bill's a sexual predator. She's a thief. Trump for potence. Clinton's for prison. For prison. But the point I'm making is that there's every bit. The allegations against Trump are every bit as valid as the suspicions against. The suspicions against Trump are every bit as valid against the suspicions against the Clintons. Trump, Pence, 2016, or America is freaking gone. See all this? America's gone. This is how it is. No matter who got in, whether it was Trump or Hillary, this is the fact, okay? That sex offenders are ruling our society, whether they're people who like to abuse women, treat women like sex objects, or whether they're people who like to buy children or have sex with children. Those are the kind of people, and that's why everything is corrupt. So the point is that when it comes to sexual offences, and this is the third point, society needs to know, and especially about people who are a risk to children. People need to know, and that's why, you know, victims of sexual abuse, especially child victims or any child abuse, need to come forward to make sure that, because although that they might have suffered abuse from somebody as a child and grown up, but nonetheless that person is still a teacher and has probably abused countless other children and is still abusing children. So it's very important to come forward to identify these people so that we can protect children, so we know that they're not a risk. And I do not believe that it is lawfully reasonable, it is unlawful to expect a society, a human society, to live with that level of suspicion and that level of evidence to support lawful suspicion around somebody who has got their finger on the nuclear button. And that's the third point of law, you see, is this idea that a person can buy silence from a victim via an out-of-court settlement. I think when it comes to things like sexual offences against women and children, or even men, any sexual offence, then it should be illegal for somebody to buy off a witness victim, a witness or a witness victim. It should be a criminal offence to force that person to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Because I think no amount of money in the world should be able to buy away evidence that an individual is actually a child abuser or a rapist or a sex offender. Because when it comes to those issues, people need to know the truth. They need to know that they're safe to just nip out of the room for a few seconds while their teenage daughter's in the presence of their friend, or that their wife is going to be safe going out shopping with their friend, that she's not going to be suddenly forced to fend off a heavy sexual attack against her, that she's not going to be left for weeks traumatised and perhaps with memories of previous assaults and abuse all re-triggered and fall into depression. That her children are going to have their normal, bright, happy mummy around, and that her husband is going to have his loving wife lying next to him in bed, not somebody who's suddenly crippled with pain and upset and depression, and who suddenly is feeling disconnected from man because she's just been treated like an animal by an animal, and that men like him have the audacity to be able to dismiss those admissions, that kind of incredible blatant bragginess about it all, as locker room talk, as if that's perfectly acceptable, that when men get together that's how they talk, when I know for a fact it isn't. And I know for a fact that most of the men I know, if one of their friends said he'd done that, and to a woman, they would be absolutely disgusted, and they would tell him to fuck off. They would. They'd literally throw him out of the door of their home. And yet somehow Americans have been persuaded to vote for this person and make him their president. And he's so powerful with their support that he even said on TV during his presidential campaign that he could literally go out into the street and shoot somebody and he still wouldn't lose any voters. That's really, really serious, that when a man feels he has that much power. And so, like I say, once somebody's made a sworn affidavit, they should know that now this is going to trial. There's no backing out. Okay? Because it is because witnesses of crimes like this can be manipulated and persuaded. I mean, both these witnesses, victim witnesses, said they'd received death threats. And again, that's lawfully evidenced, because we have on camera Trump supporters attacking even a protester at a Trump rally, and one guy who'd violently assaulted a protester turned to the camera and said, maybe next time we'll kill him. So it's not unlikely, is it, that those two impoverished abuse victims did feel very threatened and at risk, taking the most popular man in America to court. And so if it wasn't possible for them to legally drop their case against him just before it went to court, if that wasn't possible, if it was actually against the law to make a sworn affidavit and then withdraw it just before it goes to trial, then they would not have even dared attempt to. They would have known that any attempts to silence these people are futile, because otherwise they're just condemning themselves then to be prosecuted for perjury. You see. And as I say, the idea that people, again, when specifically related to sex offences, or really any offence, that if somebody has committed a serious crime like that against children as well, I think especially when it comes to sexual offences against children or even adults, it needs to be illegal for the offender to be able to use his wealth and power to buy the silence of his victims, out of court settlements in cases related to sexual offences need to be prohibited. Because that level of action, okay, that is currently supposedly lawful, is leaving society at risk. And it has left society at risk. Because apparently this man's totally innocent. We can believe all the allegations against Clinton. We can't believe any of the allegations against Trump. Why not? There's no difference. It's the same lawful evidence supporting suspicions against both. And I think we cannot tolerate to live in a world where having a lot of money means that you can sexually abuse children, force yourself on women, rape women, grab women, do, you know, even married women that who you're friends even with their husband. No amount of money should be able to buy a man the freedom to do those things. And I think, you know, as I say, I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist, and I am speaking on behalf of the men, the good men in this world that I know form the majority, who, knowing what they know about Trump, would not let that man anywhere near their teenage daughter. Because it is an offence, and it is an emotional, it's an emotional crime as well that has an impact on everybody that's close to that person who's been attacked. And so, you know, that was those were the points I wanted to make, that when it comes to sexual crimes, especially against children, anybody making a sworn affidavit and actually going to the point of trial and then withdrawing that just before the trial need to be prosecuted for perjury. And I think just having that level of law there then protects against people making false statements. It protects people from having a cloud of suspicion around them that's then unaddressed. And I think the very fact that Trump's just let this slip by and hasn't focused any attention on it, unlike his wife Melania, who's suing a British newspaper for describing her, saying she used to be an escort. So, you know, that is, and also, as I say, the idea that witnesses can be bought off, can be paid a sum of money in an out-of-court settlement, and who are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements over sexual offences, that is a crime. And especially if it's against a child, because that means a child abuser has been allowed to walk free in society with clear of any suspicion. Nobody knows a thing except his victim and his lawyers. And that person's a risk. And, you know, I was looking the other day at crowds of people were, you know, protesting about having a convicted sex offender move into their neighbourhood. And so they should, you know, he was a brutal sex offender, and he was living opposite a school they'd put him. And people are right to be concerned. And yet, if he's a rich person, he could be a sex offender and they wouldn't even know about it, because he's been able to just pay his victims large sums of money and buy their silence. And that, you know, as I say, I think that the level of suspicion now against Donald Trump is every bit as lawful as suspicions against the Clintons. And, you know, as I say, both parties very close friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And we do have confessions from him, and we also have confessions from Clinton as well. And we also have numerous witness victims. So, as I say, I think America needs to do a double take. They need to question the value of a person who has no loyalty to the law, no loyalty to a friend, no loyalty to humanity, and even is hypocritical enough that it is known, it's a known fact, that illegal immigrant labour was used to build his buildings, and he has dismissed that as, well, I wasn't responsible, I didn't know who was employed, I relied on an agent to contract the labour supply. Well, obviously he chose the cheapest contractor, didn't he? And as a patriotic citizen, apparently, who is aware that America's being flooded by illegal immigrants, as he describes them as rapists and criminals, okay? He knows that. He knows it to the extent that the first thing he wants to do when he gets to be president is build a giant wall to keep them out. But as a businessman, an American businessman, he doesn't consider it part of his patriotic duty to make sure that his business is providing well-paid employment to hard-working American citizens who need and have a right to gainful employment, paying them a living wage. He doesn't consider it his duty to make sure that that the American workforce isn't being undermined by illegal immigrants who are employed on less than a living wage and who are denying them a right to rightful employment. He doesn't consider that anyway was his patriotic duty. As a businessman, knowing the problem, he didn't consider it was his patriotic duty to make sure that the people working for him were full American citizens earning a full American wage. And so, you know, I'm very sorry if Trump supporters feel picked on here, but this isn't to pick on Trump supporters, no. You know, I feel as much for you as I feel for anybody, people who did or didn't support Trump. You know, I understand how we've been manipulated to accept the unacceptable, to swallow the camel and to strain at the gnat. We need to start understanding where that camel really is, what the camel really is we're swallowing, and really look again at the gnat. Because in life, we are going to swallow a few gnats, and they're not going to harm us. But we can't spend all our time going absolutely crazy and focusing on the gnats, if that means we're going to end up being forced to swallow a camel.